been working a lot with businesses on in the last few years, digital transformation, which obviously in the last 2 to 3 years has become AI transformation. And as I have done work in that space, I've just been fascinated by the capability of AI to just transform how we work. And I may even go so far as to say that, it's an innovation, I think, that is similar in nature to the light bulb, as it were, right? Edison's electricity, in terms of being able to shape our lives.
Are you ready to navigate the exciting yet challenging world of digital transformation and AI? Welcome to Leading with Integrity Leadership Talk. I am your host, David Hatch. And if you've ever wondered how the digital landscape and artificial intelligence are reshaping the future of business and leadership, then you're in for a treat today. My guest is Justin Tan, a distinguished expert from Evolutio Consulting. With a passion for helping leaders and businesses thrive amidst disruption and technological change, Justin is at the forefront of sustainable growth in the digital age. And today, he'll be helping us decode the rather complex world of digital transformation. We'll be talking about generative AI, disruptive technology, and even going off on a few interesting tangents, such as the impact all of this might have on the recent Hollywood strike. He's going to help us to shed some light on the dynamic role that leaders and managers can play in this evolving landscape, and providing you, the listener, with some invaluable insights and strategies, some practical tips that can help redefine your leadership approach when it comes to leveraging technology. The AI won't do it for you. Leading in tech. This month on the podcast, we are talking about the intersection of technology and leadership, the opportunities and challenges faced by tech leaders and managers in the technology sphere. We'll be going back and forth, really, between some of the people aspects of leadership that are very relevant to tech industry companies and leaders. And then, like today's episode, the more technology-focused issues and some of the implications that that technology can have on the people and on the leadership side of it. This is Leading with Integrity Leadership Talk, the podcast for first-time managers who are working in tech-driven businesses and teams and who want to be more effective, people-first leaders. Each week, you will learn the crucial strategies, mindsets, and practical tips that successful modern leaders follow to be engaging, ethical, and authentic managers who get the best from their teams. And we'll achieve all of this via weekly conversations with leaders, with leadership experts, entrepreneurs, and business owners, people who have already walked this path and have some amazing insights to share, with an added sprinkling of occasional solo episodes and some group chats where we'll have multiple guests. My name is David Hatch, and I will be your host. And leadership has always been a passion for me. After a career spent in a series of small businesses during 15 years in the aerospace industry, 5 or 6 of those at the end of that career were in a space startup in the UK. So trying to launch satellites into orbit, very cool stuff. And through all of that experience, I learned that the secret to successful management is in the ability to apply great leadership. And in turn, the secret to great leadership, it's all about your integrity, putting people before profits.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Justin, thank you very much for joining me today. It's great to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be an interesting exploration of AI and technology and digital transformation, all these other lovely things which can often be the bane of a leader's existence. So we're going to get into that in a minute.
Thank you for the invite, David. Real pleasure to be here. I know the conversation based on our chats previously is going to be super exciting. It's going to be engaging, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. And we're going to start by basically giving you the control for a bit to tell the listeners a bit about yourself, your background, what you get up to today, how you ended up doing it, and why you do it as well.
Yes, and stop me when I start ranting too long about myself. But
surely not.
So my name's Justin, and I am an advisor to companies. And what I advise on basically is on strategy and AI. Both topics are really dear to my heart. I was trained as a consultant for many years, worked with a number of different clients. But what really interested me about strategy was just the impact it has on businesses, how it makes an impact on not only the people, but the commercial business itself. It's very often neglected by many businesses who focus on the operational aspects of things, but they forget that the direction matters itself, the vision that you have for your organization. And then getting more tangible, I've been working a lot with businesses on in the last few years, digital transformation, which obviously in the last 2 to 3 years has become AI transformation. And as I have done work in that space, I've just been fascinated by the capability of AI to just transform how we work. And I may even go so far as to say that, it's an innovation, I think, that is similar in nature to the light bulb, as it were, right? Edison's electricity, in terms of being able to shape our lives. And so what I do, essentially, I'm not technical in nature, but what I do is I help companies to understand how they can bring in new innovation into their organizations, right? Align it with their existing strategy. And most importantly, actually, do so in a way that's people friendly. That's the one thing that I think always goes south in a transformation, in the sense that they forget that it's about people. So that's what I do. Most of my time, I also do trainings on these topics. So I work with organizations when I provide advice to them, but then at some point you figure out also that actually we need to do some capability building, right? So I train them on, how do you actually make better decisions, for example, on the strategy side. And in terms of AI, also training their people on how to better use AI. It's also a mindset shift as much as a capability shift, because AI is a very different way of working when you work with it. And to answer the rest of your question, how I got here, a bit of a checkered history, I would say. I started out actually in a very tangential industry, investment banking. Very quickly decided it was not my thing. Earning big bucks, no. But actually, no. Being in that financial services, high pressure M&A environment wasn't for me. But I realized that I was really interested in businesses, so I moved into consulting. Stayed there for about 8 or 9 years or so. Then subsequently moved out into industry. Enjoyed it. I learned a huge amount. I worked at Bupa, a healthcare insurer. Most people will know them. And then I moved on to a pharmaceutical company where I actually worked with startups to bring their innovations into the pharma company. Both of them learned a huge amount in those roles, but actually decided that I wanted to build something of my own. And since I liked advising companies, I liked different business models, I thought, why not go out and do a consulting and training business? And that's what brings me to today.
Well, that was actually very concise. Thank you. Yeah, didn't have to stop you rambling or ranting at all. So well done. Yeah. So I think there's a few things in there that I find quite interesting as well, and the whole piece about the strategy and how many companies don't think of it and they're too focused on the operational or the revenue in the short term. It's quite interesting, isn't it? Because if you don't set those goals, I mean, if you don't have a goal, you're never going to achieve it to start with. But it kind of, you don't have that narrative running through your business of what is everything leading towards, what's the point of what's happening right now, what's that revenue for, why are we chasing those customers and not these ones, all those kind of daily tactical decisions, if you like. You're making them in isolation, in a vacuum, if you don't have a strategy that kind of dictates that short-term direction as well.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, you've definitely struck a bell there. I think strategy does a few things, and one of those things is that it kind of it gives you something to plan towards, right? Like those financial plans, those operational plans, they should flow from your strategy, because otherwise people are going to be working in different directions and no one's going to be coordinated. That's one thing, right? You can have the best people, but if they don't have a good sense of direction, it's not going to work. But the other thing also is that a good strategy and a good vision, I would say, right, as well, is completely critical, in the sense that you can work for the best organization, and if the sole goal is to, let's say, make money, that's also fine. But I think that people operate better. They're more motivated when you actually have an overarching goal that sits even on top of your strategy, right? A vision or mission that extends into the world, right? The best companies always have something like this, right? Like Google, for example's mission is to, I think, organize the world's information, and Uber's is something around sort of making easy for people to access services or transportation or something like that. It's normally a very big goal that brings together and makes people feel that they're working towards something bigger than themselves.
Yes, I think you're right. And we see a lot, don't we, in social media, in newspapers, They don't even read a paper anymore. In news headlines, apologies.
Yeah.
About how, the millennial generations and later, they're very driven by this kind of purpose-oriented companies, and they care more about what the company is doing and why than about the paycheck and all of these things. And I think that very much speaks to what you're saying. I'm not sure I believe they care about that more than the money. I mean, as a millennial myself, it's not that I don't care about the purpose. It's just I wouldn't say it's more important than being able to pay the bills and keep the roof over my head. Maybe parity, but anyway, it is interesting though, because there's obviously this rising movement, isn't there, where I think gone are the days where a company could just be about their bottom line and nothing else mattered. And I think that is an interesting shift as well.
You raised an important point, maybe slightly tangential, but I'm going to say it anyway. But I read several years ago, I think I read a book. I think it's by Dan Pink, a professor, and he says that there are three components that are critical for someone to be satisfied or happy in their work, right? And of course, the money is a very big part of them. But he also said that mastery is very important. So mastery being the sense that you can become good at something, you can see yourself improving over time. Because as human beings, you want to see progression, right? You don't want to be static. The other one is, as you said, is purpose, right? That's really important because people want to know that they're doing something a little bit bigger than themselves. And then the third one is autonomy, which I think has really come to light in the last few years, autonomy, because you want to know that actually you want to do things in your own way. You don't want to have people breathing down your neck. And you know that people trust you to get things done without sitting in the office for 8 hours, 10 hours a day. And I found that these messages really resonated with me, right? And every time I've moved to a new role, I assess it based on these three conditions.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And the autonomy one in particular, I think, I don't know, I feel like that's always been a priority for people. I think maybe what's changed in the last few years is that kind of flipping on its head of where the power in the relationship was between the employer and the employee. I think what happened over COVID and lockdowns and enforced remote working and then the Great Resignation as well, and then quiet quit, all these other buzzwords that have come out since then. I think all of those things were really kind of a symptom of a change in that workplace relationship. And maybe that means that employees now have more ability, more autonomy over their careers to be able to demand more autonomy in their jobs.
I would hope so. I think it's an important thing, right? Because you don't want to be running a sweatshop. At least I don't want to be running a sweatshop, right? As it were. I don't think it's a good place to be in. I don't want to be in. So I want to make sure that people that work for me are not in that type of environment.
Yeah, indeed. And again, you read things about some of the big corporations and like high profile CEOs and things and what they're saying. And you wonder whether that narrative is about to flip back again. I hope it's not. I feel like we've been making progress the last few years, but I suppose time will tell.
Yeah, you do get them, right? Like you have Elon Musk very famously with his businesses, right? You either get into the office 5 days a week or we sack you. And then you have the CEOs of like some of the major US banks, especially JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. I'm like, it's the same thing with them. But I'm going to say this is a generational issue because the leaders of those companies, well, I say with maybe the exception of Elon Musk, are still largely of the older generation. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the older generation. It's just that I think millennials, Gen Zs work in a different way. They're more comfortable being, in a remote setting. Now, that's not to say the remote setting is always the best, because it isn't, right? I value human contact, human relationships. And when I do a workshop, for example, with my clients, it's so much more effective when it's face to face. But there's a time for that. And, spending 3 hours of your day commuting is not value adding.
Well, I totally agree about that. It reminds me of. I think you're probably right about the generational thing. It reminds me of. I'm going to paraphrase it because I can't remember the exact quote, but it's from Douglas Adams and one of his Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books, which is one of my favorite books. I'm always quoting it. But there's this thing he says in there about how we view technology, our relationship with technology. I think he wrote it in like the 70s, I think. So probably not super relevant in terms of what the technology was he was talking about. But he was basically saying the stage of your life at which something is invented directly affects your relationship with it. So if it existed before you were born, then it's old fashioned, out of date, you don't really care about it.
Yeah.
If it's invented in like the first 10 to 15 years of your life, then you're probably going to make money doing something to do with it. If it was invented after that point, then it's newfangled, scary. You don't like it. You don't want to work with it. You don't want to know about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite an interesting thing. I've butchered the quote, obviously, but I do think that's quite an interesting, especially because he wrote that so long ago, and yet it's still so relevant.
It is. I mean, it is the relationship with technology, right? That's hugely important, and it's reflected now in sort of how AI is coming into society, right? It's been a buzzword that's sitting in the back of people's minds for like at least the last 15 years, but like it's only in the last maybe 2 years that actually it started to really get into the nuts and bolts of people's lives.
Indeed. I guess what I'm trying to say is when we think about it in the context of the generational point you made, almost doesn't matter what generation you're in or how you're getting on with the workplace, whether it's remote working or AI or the smartphone was the other one not so long ago. I think having that awareness that generational aspect, that relationship with technology does exist and that it's different for each generation potentially is the first step, isn't it? To coping with that properly, to leading your organization effectively, to really getting the most out of all those different people, different generations in your business, rather than this kind of come to the office 9 to 5 or you're sacked sort of approach.
Absolutely. And even within generations itself, right? Like that's a very big group. One generation is a huge group. And I was talking a few days ago to the chief marketing officer of a company, and obviously we were talking about AI. And he was saying that the attitudes towards AI did differ in his team, whereas you had a lot of his team who were really excited about it and its ability to really transform their work. One particular team, the creative team, was actually completely resistant to using it at all, because there was the perception that AI actually, their jobs were the most at risk from AI, right? Because right now you have like image generators that would be creating images that they used to be doing, and then creating presentations that they used to be doing. So their reaction was almost flipped, right? Whereas they should be engaging it, bringing it into their work, actually upskilling themselves so that it worked alongside technology. They became completely resistant and just said that I don't want to engage with the technology at all. And it can happen in any generation because those guys are young, and you essentially need to make sure that you're not only seeing that generational point, but the fact that different people are coming from different perspectives because of their role, their cultural context, but also their personal preferences.
The funny thing is, in their personal or private lives, they might be massive advocates for it, but because they see a different impact on their professional lives, they've reacted differently perhaps to how they would in another context.
Absolutely so. Absolutely so. Yeah. So, all I think the main message here is that any change that you bring about, I'm not even talking about technology, any change that you bring about has to be done with a close eye on the people that you're leading along the journey, right? It's ultimately we're humans and we live to be humans, right? So focusing on the technology first is not the right thing to do, because we're trying to empower people rather than to replace them. I would say for the majority of cases, that's the goal. Certainly you hear about sometimes people being replaced by technology. Inevitable. It's come up with any technology that's happened over time. But the ultimate goal of technology should be to enhance the human experience.
Totally agree with that. And I mean, yes, we've seen it a few times, haven't we? I mean, even in our lifetime, it's happened quite a few times. I mean, automation in factories, robots replacing the production line, all that kind of thing. And I think when it comes to the individual, I don't want to say worker, but it's the person doing the job. I think that there is a case where you've got to try and meet the technology in the middle. You've got to help the management do that change program effectively, because I think if you do just dig your heels in and say it's new, it's going to take my job, I refuse to deal with it, then that becomes self-fulfilling, doesn't it? If you refuse to work with it, then yeah, it will take your job, or more importantly, someone else who is willing to work with the technology will take your job.
Absolutely. And the fact is that I was going to make 2 points. The first point is that technology taking jobs is not new in a sense, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. First of all, I know that's maybe not the most empathetic thing to be saying, but for society as a whole, I think that there's good in that, because it renews society, and what we should be doing as society is to help people along that journey of change. But I was just reflecting back, like I think in the 18th century there were like people employed like I think knocker-uppers, right? Like little boys to go around to different houses to like wake people up, basically, to get ready for work. But obviously with the advent of like alarm clocks and all that obviously went out. You don't need to get people to wake people up anymore, because you have an alarm clock to do that. And that's a good thing, right? It's those little boys could then go and sell newspapers or do other things that they can earn money in a different way. But the second thing I was going to say as well is like, it's not always imperative on the people to change themselves, right? Like the environment that they're in is very, very important. So if I were a CEO, for example, and change is always, has to be led as an example from the top. If I were a CEO, for example, like the messaging that I share with the company is hugely critical. If I were to say something like, well, actually, AI is going to massively increase efficiencies. We're going to reduce our workforce by 25%, and that's that, right? We're all going to be happier. Shareholders are going to be a lot richer. That's not going to go down very well. I put it a bit flippantly, but there actually was a CEO in Southeast Asia of a tech company who pretty much said that, and then he let go a bunch of people straight after that message, right? That message not very helpful for people, but if as a CEO, your message is a lot more empathetic, actually you focus on the fact that technology should be an enabler and enhancer of the human experience, and you recognize the fact, right, in your vision, let's say for AI for the company, that inevitably there will be some job losses, but our goal is to keep people in jobs. We'll move you to a new job if we can, and if we really, really can't, we will try to help you get a new role. And it's that kind of like empathy, it's that kind of like care for people that I think is hugely important to transformation, right? Because the people who stay in the company, who are not let go, they will also see what you have done. And in the back of my mind, if you have not treated people well, I'm thinking now the Twitter experience post Elon Musk, that's going to stay at the back of their minds. And if you've not done it right, you've essentially destroyed any loyalty that you've built up with people over the last few years of the career.
Absolutely, yes. And Twitter's an example that comes up quite a lot, particularly in the context of remote working. Because obviously before the takeover, they were probably one of the best examples of how to do that well, and the way that they managed their workforce through COVID. And then I think they were one of the first ones to come out and say, we're going to have 100% remote working policy, and all of this. And then just the complete contrast in the same organization. It just shows how much can change just as the result of a different approach to leadership and management.
It is. I mean, that's a really drastic one. Obviously, most of the time you don't have something as drastic. But change is always is very often led from the top. Sometimes you get bottom up changes bubbling up, but it's the leadership that sets the example and the tone for everything to come.
I kind of think the most successful changes, though, are the ones where it's a bit of both. And I mean, I said meet in the middle earlier. That's effectively what it is. Because yes, you've got to have that leadership from the top if you want the change to stick. Because if the leaders aren't vocalizing their belief in it, if they're not walking the talk, if they're not living that change themselves, then no one's going to take it seriously. But at the same time, if you don't have that sort of the grassroots buy-in to that change, they're the people who actually have to implement it. If they don't believe in it, then at best, it's going to be half-hearted and it probably won't stick.
I completely agree with that. What I would say, although that also is that leaders play a big role in helping to shape that grassroots. We call it grassroots, but I still think that leaders have a big role to play in it. Because they set we talked earlier about vision, but they set the direction. If they get a direction that people buy into, that's going to make the grassroots movement a lot easier. If they set an example, I think that's the most important thing. People are more likely to believe that they're genuine and true as well. So I would say grassroots is hugely important, but again, leaders have a huge role to play in just shaping that environment that people think about and are motivated within.
Definitely. I think a massive part of that, aside from the leading from example and setting the vision, I think is actually just opening that conversation, showing that they want to hear from people. What are your opinions on this? Preferably before the change is decided, or at least the exact directions of it. I think that helps so massively in getting that buy-in, is if people feel involved in the process rather than having it imposed upon them.
Yeah. I love that point, actually. One of the things that we do when I do a transformation, whether digital or AI, is that we encourage, obviously, leaders to communicate the vision, or at least the direction, but also actually to get the opinions of the people in the organization. This could be things like, just a town hall, but also could be like employee surveys. In fact, I'm running 2 of them now for some clients, where we're just asking the entire organization essentially how they feel about AI, but also how they're using AI at the moment, and really how AI can help them. But the big thing also we ask is like, do you have any concerns? Do you think that any risks that AI could bring to the organization? Because in the back of their minds, right, people will sometimes not say these things, especially when they feel that, let's say, the tide is against them. They become hesitant, right? But it's important that you surface all of these concerns, A, because they're very valid for the business, but B, also because sometimes you need to address them, right? A lot of the times people have peers that are sometimes very founded, but sometimes not founded. And actually, if you become more familiar, more aware of what's happening, you can address those fears directly. But if you don't know that people have them, you can't, right?
Oh, exactly. Yes. And there's parallels with other aspects of leadership there as well, isn't there? I think the leaders who don't want to hear about problems and, bring me solutions only, that old buzz phrase, but you actually want to hear what people think the risks are, what their problems are, what the mistakes have been, where we've gone wrong. I think you want to hear that more than you want to hear about the successes, about things going right. Now, obviously, you want to make sure you're always aware of those things, but I think it's more important to know what's going wrong, because if you don't know about it, you can't fix it, or you can't solve it.
Yeah, and that's such a good one. And it requires a bit of a cultural shift, right, in many organizations, because especially I've now consulted to many organizations, and there's often a fear of like just surfacing problems, because they feel like their managers or even their peers or their subordinates might see that they're not doing their job, that they don't know what's going on. That fear needs to be addressed, right, by creating an environment of psychological safety. And again, coming back to obviously the theme of the podcast, which is around leadership, it's hugely set by the top. And Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, wrote a book several years back, which I really enjoyed. No Rules is the name of that book, and in it he tells about his the approach that they've taken to building out Netflix's culture. And one of those key aspects actually is creating an environment where people are completely safe in coming out and, I wouldn't say criticizing, but it's really like pointing out like issues or flaws that they might see with each other, and they see that as a generous step, right? It's a value adding thing. If I take the time to tell you that you're not doing something right, that you could be doing something better, I'm being generous to you because I'm giving you an opportunity for improvement. And one of the key steps there is that the leader demonstrates that that's okay to do. And so Reed Hastings was saying in his book that one of the things that they did to make that step was that in their town halls or their forums, he as a leader and their senior team would come out, openly discuss some of the mistakes that they made, and be very brutal about it, actually. Open, but brutal and transparent, but not in a mean way. And basically that started to get the ball rolling, right? Because people then decided, well, Reed has done that. It's now safe for me to come out and do it. In fact, it's expected of me.
Well, I mean, that's leading by example, isn't it? In a nutshell.
Mm.
And that is an incredibly difficult thing to build into a culture, particularly if it's an established culture and you're trying to make that change. There's the big powerful examples like that, but I think there's also the day-to-day, the everyday stuff that leaders do as well. So thinking about how you react to someone making a mistake, for example. I mean, we've probably all done it ourselves as managers, and I'm sure we've all worked for people who've done it to us. But you hear about something goes wrong and your immediate reaction is, oh no, oh, what are we going to do? Or you just make you sigh, you make the grimace on the face, and you don't react very positively. You react as a negative. And to a great extent, that's human nature. It's an emotion that we can't control. But at the same time, I think part of being a leader is getting control of that and making sure that you respond in a positive, motivational way so that your employee or your worker or your staff member doesn't feel like, oh no, I've made a mistake. The boss is really angry. I can never do that again. Ever, or more importantly, I won't tell them next time something goes wrong.
Yeah, and then pardon my French, but you're even more screwed after that.
Absolutely.
No, that hugely resonates. I think a big part of leadership, and people always focus on the external, but a huge part of leadership is managing yourself, right? To be able to manage others well, you need to be able to have a handle on yourself. And it's not just this little, it's not just the face that you show the external world as well, but it's the inner environment within yourself, right? Because leaders go through a lot of disruption, and a lot of responsibility. And a lot of the times, right, a leader, and I certainly felt it a lot of the time as well, you can either feel an inferiority complex, right? If you're put in a situation where you're not entirely comfortable, but you don't want to show your team, right? Because then you feel, oh gosh, they won't think I know what I'm doing. That's something that's an emotion that needs to be managed as well. Or sometimes, you just take a dip, right? Because not every day is rosy, right? Life throws you lemons, as it were. And how do you manage those lemons is a hugely important part of being a leader as well. Because it sets the emotional tone for when things to come, right? Internally, if you feel distraught or you feel shaken by a problem, that affects and it's okay to feel those things, right? Acknowledge those things. But being too long in that mode affects your ability to react to things, right? So then your goal as a leader is to reflect and put things in perspective, and then seek the help, right? If you can't solve the problem yourself, go talk to a peer, go talk to your manager, and put things in perspective, get their advice. So that's, I think, a big part of managing the self, and an important part of leadership.
Yes, definitely. And it's a parallel with emotional intelligence as well, isn't it? Because you've got a part of emotional intelligence, and an aspect of it that is less spoken about is that kind of self-regulation, that management of your own emotions, like being aware of what they are to start with, because I think a lot of people can be a bit less self-aware about that sort of thing, and you just sort of react, as I said earlier, rather than taking the time to pause and think about, okay, well, how's that made me feel and why, and what should I actually do about that? What's the impact going to be on the team if I react in this way or that way? And actually applying a bit of, as you say, self-management, I think it's really important as well, definitely.
Building on that, you mentioned being conscious about your impact on the team. I think to do that, you need empathy. And that's, again, one of the key strengths of a good leader is empathy. When I think of a leader that sort of like embodies empathy, I always think about Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. And I remember reading his book several years back called Hit Refresh. And he was describing the journey that brought him to his style of empathetic leadership. He said that, he went through a difficult time because his son Zain, I think, had cerebral palsy. And it was in caring for his son that he learned how to see the difficulties, the struggles of others as his own, right? Because he had to do that to be able to be in his son's shoes. And unfortunately, his son passed away a few years ago after his struggles. But that learning has really shaped his approach to how he manages Microsoft, I would say. I've spoken to Microsoft friends from Microsoft over the years, and the change that has come over Microsoft in the last decade since Nadella took over has been massive. You might be familiar with Steve Ballmer, the previous CEO of Microsoft. He had a very, very different style, very passionate, very boisterous, but sometimes antagonistic in a way. Creating sort of that friction in the organization was actually his goal, whereas Nadella was all about empathy, bringing people together along a common goal, and to make people comfortable, not in a complacent sense, but comfortable in the sense that they're comfortable working together to bring out the best in each other. And
doing all these things we've been talking about as well, presumably, surfacing the issues, truth to power, all those lovely things that are really important to a successful culture.
Yes, exactly.
Well, this has been quite an interesting discussion so far. I've been really enjoying it. I hope you have as well. I'm conscious that I haven't really asked many questions, and we've sort of covered a lot of the things I wanted to talk about already. So we've covered, I think, what a successful strategy, what an effective digital transformation looks like. We've seen some of the pitfalls to avoid as well. And I think we've probably talked a bit about the role that AI could play. But I mean, so if we talk about the generative AI, ChatGPT is the buzz phrase lately, isn't it? Everyone's starting to use it. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's saying if you're not using it, you're going to fail as an entrepreneur and all of that kind of stuff. So what do you think the actual long-term impact of it is going to be in terms of the way businesses operate?
I think I sort of alluded to it earlier when I said that, I thought that the advent of AI in its current form is, not incomparable to like almost the advent of, I say, the light bulb or electricity, in the sense that it is a foundational technology, right? Like the combustion engine as well, because it sets the platform on which new technologies, new innovations, new ways of working can come into play, right? It's the basis on which you can start to build bigger and better things. So on that note, what I think is that it's going to be a huge step change in the way that we work, that businesses operate, and already we're seeing use cases that are brought across the entire organization, right? We talked about you and I, before we hopped onto this call, we talked about the impact that it has on customer services, right? Already we're seeing that customer satisfaction might actually be better when AI driven as opposed to humans, right? Because we're saying humans can sometimes take a lazy day off, but that's not going to be the case for AI, right? It's having an impact on marketing functions. It's having an impact on the HR functions, and so on and so forth. And even like new products in R&D, that's going to be impacted by AI as well. And I think in general, when you think about it, the thing is that this particular AI change is particularly powerful because it's democratic. Many other technology changes that I've worked with over the last few years or last decade or so, they've been quite top-down in nature, right? Like you get a CRM system, you put it in place, or you put in a new finance system or ERP system. They tend to be quite monolithic / top-down, right, or functional in nature. But this AI wave is hugely democratic, right? Everyone can get onto ChatGPT. Everyone can use it to improve their workflow or the way they operate, as long as they have the creativity and the mind to do it. So I think that's one of the major things that will make it a lot more encompassing. And I think the goal of an organization or any team should actually be to create the opportunities for bottom-up innovation with AI and generative AI to arise, right? Already I'm seeing in some organizations, I heard a term recently, and it was like hidden cyborgs within the organization, people who are already using generative AI to a huge extent, but they remain hidden away from the organization. It's about bringing these people into the light, giving them the opportunity to showcase their work and to share it with others. So, long story short, I think the impact is going to be hugely all-encompassing. It's going to come with a lot of disruption for sure. People are going to have to find new ways of working with it. But I think in the end, it's going to require a mix of both like top-down and bottom-up impetus to drive that change.
One of the things that really interests me about just technology generally is the pace of change. And if you look at like the last century and a half, and coming from an aerospace background, I always put this in the context of aircraft, right? Because I'm a bit of a plane geek, as my friends would say. So if we go, 1903, right, the first manned flight happens. Less than 50 years later, we're achieving supersonic flight. And then another 20-ish years after that, standing on the moon. The pace of change in a 50 to 60 year period there is just incredible. I mean, you look back now and it beggars belief almost. So do you think we're, with AI in general and the generative aspect of it in particular, do you think we're seeing the start or the end of another kind of cycle of that change? Where do you think we'll be in another 50 years if you had to be a futurist for a moment?
Yeah, well, not a futurist by profession, but what I would say is that I think this AI wave is only at the start. Actually, I read a recent paper by McKinsey, and they were saying they had estimates basically on when various capabilities would be reached. For example, the ability to like interpret complex passages and stuff like that, was way out. 5 years ago was way out into like the 2030s, for example. And then the recent wave of AI has brought all of these expectations of when these capabilities will be reached a lot closer in. And I think I'm not clear yet whether the current set of technologies will bring us to what the industry calls like artificial general intelligence, where the AI essentially matches the general capabilities of a human brain. And that's for me is the massive benchmark, right? Essentially because the AI maybe in a way almost becomes sentient. The key difference between the AIs now and AGI or artificial general intelligence is that the AIs are really good in a specific task usually. Large language models by ChatGPT are good in a broad range of tasks, but they're still quite limited, in terms of the capability, and they don't really have true understanding of the world around them. But I think that moment in time when artificial general intelligence comes is that landmark moment where the progress will shoot up even further, because then your innovation is no longer actually then dependent on human ingenuity and innovation, right? Because the AIs will then contribute as much to general innovation as they can, as you can. So when that moment comes, I don't know. I don't even know if it built on the current set of generative AI technologies, right? But I get the sense that it's whereas I would have said it's like 50, 100 years out, just a few years ago, I think it's now something that's possible in the next 10 to 20 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that is quite a big difference then. Interesting.
Maybe I'm too bullish, but that's it.
No, we'll have to speak again in 20 years' time. I'll mark it in the calendar and see where we are.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an exciting time to see all these things developing and the capabilities. Possibly scary if you think about it in the wrong way, but I choose not to do that. So
yeah. I mean, it's you're right to bring that up. I mean, you choose not to think about it, and I choose not to think about it. But it's very right that people are afraid of it, because in Unchained, AI can cause massive damage to the world, and that's why I think it's imperative that governments, companies themselves self-regulate, put governance around the issue, because there's huge scope for bad actors, right, of any sort to abuse AI, right? Just like any other technology, it can be used for good and for bad. And the more powerful the technology, the more the better the good, but also the worse the bad, as it were.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that springs to mind actually on that, I saw a video the other week on, I think it was on Facebook somewhere, but it was these Boston Dynamics guys, the robotics people.
Yes.
And they obviously, their social media has blown up since a couple of years back with the dancing robots. I'm sure everyone would have seen that video by now. But this one was new to me. I'm not sure it was all from them, because it was one of these sort of compilations of clips of different robots. But a part of that really stuck out to me as a little bit frightening was they were doing basically, I guess it's failure testing, isn't it? It's how it learns. So they were like kicking these robots, they're pushing them over, they're throwing stuff at them so they could learn how to get back up, how to dodge. And in one case, which I thought was quite scary, how to retaliate.
Ooh.
And I just thought, like, why would you teach a robot that? That seems like a poor decision for our future. Have you not seen the Terminator films? Why are you doing this?
God, yeah, it's that is a very interesting one. You brought up an interesting one in my. Have you heard of Isaac Asimov's three laws of robotics?
Indeed, yeah, big fan of his writings. In fact,
yeah, and obviously the for listeners here who are less familiar with that, right? The three laws of robotics are basically, the first law is that a robot should do no harm to himself, and then the second law is that should do no harm to a human, and then it supersedes the first law basically. Or I can't remember if the other way around, but certainly the harm to the human is more important than the harm to a robot, and it's almost part of the robot's constitution, as it were, right? Basically, it cannot be overridden, and I think we may not build something like that, but some sort of governance and constitution is required, right? Because you can't have robots retaliating and punching humans, basically.
Yes, it was a little bit more personal a retaliation than that, but I'll send you the video off.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a kick, and it was not of a nice place to be kicked.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't want to mess with the robot.
Well, quite. But then, we're living in the age of generative AI, which can now be applied to video. It might have all been fake, and I just can't tell the difference. Who knows? Yeah,
you're very right. Yeah, I've seen some deepfakes now that are so impressive. You just can't tell the difference.
Yeah, I mean that's a kind of scary piece as well, isn't it? Particularly, I mean, I guess it's quite topical, isn't it, with the strikes that are going on in Hollywood? Part of the reason behind that, of course, is this whole deepfakes thing. And
yeah. I remember just a few years back when they did, some actors, and they did they had the ability to basically age an actor or make them look younger, right? I always thought that was super impressive. But actually now I read recently that there was an actor who passed away, and then they decided that to basically use generative AI to essentially replace the actor in the subsequent film or episode or whatever it is.
I mean, they've been doing that for a little while. I don't think they were using generative AI necessarily, though. I think it was just a 3D artist was doing it manually, whatever that means. So it was one of the Star Wars films, wasn't it? And it was Peter Cushing.
Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, they did Carrie Fisher as well, but obviously she hadn't died at that point in that film. But anyway, yeah, interesting. I'm not sure where I sit on the ethics of it, because particularly with things like that, where it's a character, an actor, it's a face that we've all grown up with. It's in the collective consciousness, but obviously they're not there anymore. But they want to tell new stories with the same character. I don't know whether it's right to replicate their likeness. I mean, I guess if the family is okay with it, maybe, but then also I can see where the actors guild types are coming from in terms of, well, you're doing us out of work. Couldn't you recast and give someone else an opportunity? And I guess it's similar to the conversation we were having earlier, isn't it, about the door knockers losing their jobs to new technology?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, look, the actors definitely have something right. I mean, it'd be completely insane if like 100 years time, like Harrison Ford is still starring in some movies down the line, and he has no say in it. Like when it comes down to it, like at the very least, your likeness should be something that you can control, right? Shouldn't be exposed. You should have the rights of permissions to that at least. And I can see where actors are coming from. And frankly, this is a really tough one. I don't know how industry and the actors or actresses can come to some sort of accommodation. They will obviously have to, because otherwise we'll have nothing to watch over the next few years.
Or it will just be animated.
Or be animated, yeah, exactly.
Which actually, again, makes me think of, I don't know if you've ever seen Futurama.
Yes.
Yeah, so they have a whole TV industry where it's all robots doing the acting. Maybe that's the future. Who knows?
Yeah. I wouldn't want that. No, like as I said before, technology, for me, technology could be more, but and maybe something different. But for me, what I want it to be is as an enabler and an enhancer of the human experience, right? Because otherwise, why invent something if the only goal is for some capitalists to get rich?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely with you there. Okay, one more question on this, and then we'll talk a bit more about leadership. What advice would you have to offer to maybe a manager or a business owner, business leader who's struggling to adjust their organization to a new technology? Seems quite topical with what we've just been talking about.
Yeah. So some of the key themes that have come along, I think a technology change is no different than any other business transformation. The degree of change may be different, but when it comes down to it, any business transformation is just that, a transformation and a journey of change. And what that means, I think it comes down to is the people are hugely important. When I think about transformation, I always think back to Jim Collins' great book, Good to Great, written a long time ago, maybe in the 1980s or 90s, like that, but still hugely relevant. It's got a bunch of good lessons, but the ones that I always take away is that it's the who first and then the what, basically, right? I think he uses an interesting quote there, which is like, get the right people on the bus and get the wrong people off the bus, right? And that's not to say you start firing people, but basically when we're going through a change in the organization, you need to get people who are aligned to the new values and the direction that you want to go in, right? Because if you're constantly fighting against people, pushing back, and will never believe what you're trying to do, it will not work, right? And maybe those people will be better off in a different organization, right? So maybe it's best to let them go, and then you bring on people who you're sure will be aligned with the change. So that's the first thing. But at the same time, if people are in the middle and they need educating, they need awareness building, help them along that journey. That's hugely important. I think also it's important to create like a culture, and again from Jim Collins' book, a culture of discipline, right? Any change is not going to be done just like that, right? Changes take a long time to come into effect, right? The most successful companies, they go through transformations that are years long, right? It doesn't happen overnight. If there is a big bang transformation and a company, a CEO says, I'm going to achieve X by the next 1 year, I don't believe them. It just doesn't work that way, right? So therefore, what you need to do in that environment to succeed in change is to create a culture of discipline where you slowly change the culture. People become committed to the new change, but then persevere in it, because the results are not going to come in 1, 2, or 3 months, right? You might get a few positive results, a nice signaling that we're moving in the right direction, but the true effects are not going to manifest till like maybe 3, 4, 5 years later at the earliest, right? And that requires perseverance to put it in. And yeah, so I think those are my key messages for managers who are trying to kind of enact that transformational change, as it were.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good tips, I think, especially if taken in concert with what we were talking about earlier in the episode about the responsibility of the leader to kind of build up that buy-in. Because I think that's part of the culture of discipline and perseverance, isn't it? Is people have to be on board with the change to a great extent, I think.
Yeah, very, very much so. And then all of the other things that we talked about also apply, right? The empathy, the addressing the uncertainties, the fears in people, those are all critical as well.
Absolutely. As far as your own experiences of leadership, both as a leader and working for others, what's been the biggest lesson that you've learned about how best to lead in your career so far?
I think the biggest lesson for me is actually being generous. The best leaders I've been with or have worked with have been hugely generous with their time, with their resources for me. I remember one of the leaders that I worked with, he's one of the guys I look up to most. He'd always have time for me to discuss something, right? Hugely busy guy. He's always working, on various different projects. But if you ask him for that 15 minutes, that half an hour, if you tell him of concern, he will always find time in his diary for you, and he will patiently talk you through it. And he won't be looking at his watch in the meantime, saying, "Oh, I need to go somewhere," right? You know he's listening to you. But at the same time, he's also generous in the sense that he's always thinking about what's good for you, right? I remember he always used to tell me, JT, that's why he called me JT. JT, your success is my success, right? Whatever is good for you, it's going to be good for me. So tell me what I can do to help you. And it doesn't matter what my request was, but he would find a way to kind of just make it happen. I remember at some point, I was like, there's this kind of subject that I really want to learn about. He's like, no problem, let's go find a course. And I came back, the course was quite expensive. It's like, no, we'll find a way to like get it through budgeted and so on and so forth. And that's just one example, but he's done many other different things to kind of like help me along, right? And even to this day, I no longer work for him. He's moved on to a different organization, but he'd be very conscientious about just checking in from me from time to time, right? He's like, we are friends now, right? And that's what a leader is, right? A leader's relationship with his team extends beyond the bounds of a company, of a team, as it were, right? It goes into building a genuine relationship with them.
100%. Yeah, it's that kind of the deeper connections, isn't it, that we always talk about. And I think a couple of things out of that I really love. One of them is the generosity on I guess, the day-to-day, the small scale. It is really, really meaningful, actually, to a lot of people, particularly when you're leading them. And having the presence of mind and being intentional enough about that conversation and always being open to talking it's hard, I think, to overestimate the impact that can have if you do it consistently over a long period of time. And it makes people feel valued, it makes them feel seen and heard, all these things that I think are crucial for a leader to, A, build an effective long-term relationship, but B, to get the best out of people.
Yes, so much. People always think like tech companies, they offer these things like, the huge perks, right? The staff canteen, the massages, the whatever it is. Those things are, in a way, they're very easy to replace. They're very easy to remove. They're also not major differentiators in an organization. But the true differentiator in an organization is the leaders and the culture of the leaders in caring for the people and helping them to develop. That's not replicable because that's so difficult to build over time.
Yeah, I so agree. And it kind of brings me to the second point as well, which is it's about the meaningful stuff, isn't it? And yeah, I mean, the canteen, the free food, the free pizza, the bean bags, the whatever else it is, like none of that means anything. It's just quite often a knee-jerk reaction to a manager finding out somebody's unhappy about something. So they throw another perk into the mix and hope that will shut everyone up and the complaining will go away. But it's not a meaningful thing. And so the second thing that I really loved about your story there was going out of his way to help you with your personal development, finding you a course, finding the budget to pay for that course, all of that kind of stuff. It's meaningful. It makes a difference to people's careers, which makes a difference to their lives. And I think that's what leadership really is all about. It's not about this tokenism nonsense and giving people a free pizza once a week or whatever.
Yeah, very much so. And It's funny because like when I think back to the leaders I've worked with, it's those small moments like that where have made such a huge impact. Like I remember specific things that were said to me. I remember the emotions I felt when a leader has helped me along. I don't remember the perks or the fancy meal or whatever it is that came along, but it's those emotional moments that actually have stayed most with me and are the hardest to replicate because they require so much intention and so much thought. Whereas, like as you say, putting in a beanbag, so easy to do, right? Just throw a few bucks at it, and there you go. You've got a beanbag.
Yeah, exactly. I think to really truly get that right, I think as well, you have to care about people. I think if you've got to care about those specific individuals as well. Like if you're just going through the motions of that, it's not going to be as effective. Yeah, it's fine. I could tell you some stories about past jobs, but maybe that's not wise in a public forum. Yeah, there's one particular one that I love, and I've probably told this story before, so apologies, listeners, if you have heard it. But there was just such an incident where, you know, it had come to the attention of management that people maybe weren't that happy. So they organised this big away day event where we were going to go and do all these focus groups and all of this stuff. And one of the things that came out of it was people weren't that happy about the working environment in terms of the office itself. It wasn't very welcoming. It wasn't that comfortable and all that kind of thing. And so by the time we got back to the office the next day, and this is just tokenism 101 right here, they'd put in 6 potted plants in the office. And then my favourite bit of the story is that on closer inspection, half of them were plastic. So they couldn't even fork out for real plants. I just loved it.
They couldn't commit to watering the plants over a period of time.
Yeah, I know.
I've got an interesting story actually, and it would be the last one I share from a tokenism standpoint, but I thought a really good one. My partner used to be a lawyer, and lawyers, terrible work-life balance. And one day the firm decides, we need to focus more on mental health. So basically, they organize this mental health event, and then the day comes along and they're like, no lawyers there. At the mental health event, they've got like this big speaker, and then they've got some clients to come along, and it's like, hey, you guys, like, let's go to the event now. But like all these guys, these lawyers are like busy beavering away at their work, right? Because they've got so much to do. And then my partner is completely outraged because, like, first of all, they don't actually really care about their mental health of the associates of the lawyers working for them. And then they organize this tokenistic event which they're trying to get people to go through. And in the meantime, if they go to this event, they can't get their work done, so their mental health suffers. So true tokenism in all its splendor.
Yeah, it's left hand, right hand, isn't it? And just not thinking through the whole picture. Knee-jerk reactions, definitely.
Exactly.
So potentially difficult question for you then. If you could go back and do one thing differently in your career, what would that be?
So there are many things I would do differently as you look back on hindsight. But I guess the one that stands out the most for me is that I would have started taking risks a lot earlier. Prior to my setting out and starting my own advisory and training business, I take a very safe path through my career, right? I was in investment banking working for a big bank, and then I went to a big consulting firm. I went to work for a gigantic insurer, and then I went to work for an even more gigantic pharmaceutical company. There was very little risk in my career, always very safe. But since I've left, and it's not because the companies I work for were bad companies in any way, but since I've left, I've taken on more risk, a lot more uncertainty, but it's brought a lot more fulfillment as well. And of course, the upsides would increase as well, because when you start doing things, you taking the risk, the upside should increase. But even more than the upsides, or the financial upsides, I should say, is that taking risk has brought me more joy, because you go through more ups and downs, as it were, and I value those ups and downs, because in the past, right, like, this was a constant flow in a corporate job in a big company. But those ups and downs, those downs actually give a lot of meaning to the ups. The downs give a lot of meaning to the ups, because if you don't have those days where you're in the docks, in the dumps, trying to find clients because it's completely quiet, then how do you appreciate those moments where you've won a pitch, or you've celebrated with a client on a great workshop or a great training day, right? Those things have so much more value when I went out, took a risk and started my own business.
Yeah, I identify with that as well, I must say. It's there are things, there's risks I wish I'd taken earlier in my career. I've probably still done most of them, but it's been a lot harder to get to grips with it later in my work life, let's say. But I'm not that old.
we never are young at heart, eh?
Yeah, well, exactly. You're only as old as you feel, as they say.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
I feel different ages, different days, if I'm honest.
Leadership Heroes.
Okay, last question for you. My favourite question. It's called Leadership Heroes. And if you had to pick one person, I always insist on one person, but quite a few people often give me 2 or 3, but I'll allow it probably. Anyway, one person, alive or dead, past or present, real or fictitious, who in your opinion, just to add a bit of interest to the mix, bit of uncertainty. So who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership? Who would that person be and why?
It might be a bit boring, but but I think it's Satya, who I discussed just now, and I always bring him up just because like him, I've gone through a journey of learning empathy over time, right? It's not everyone is brought up to be empathetic, and I cannot say that I'm fully there yet, right? We're all going on a journey, but I've really been inspired by the journey that he went through, because he didn't start off being sort of the empathetic leader that he is, but he's made an effort to like shape his journey, shape the way he sees the world, shape the way he relates to other people, and in that sense, bring that entire philosophy to an organization, right? If you look at what he's done and the success of the company, right? He's not only renewed Microsoft to become financially successful, because just about 15 years ago it wasn't, right? It was in a dip, in a down after the Bill Gates years. But Satya Nadella has really transformed the company. But how I like that he's transformed it not through sort of really fanciful fanciful strategy. He basically just said when he entered the company that our goal is to become a leader in the cloud space, right? And he's gone and done that. That's his simple strategy, basically. But how he's done it is very interesting, because as a leader, he's created this like atmosphere of empathy and openness that has fostered a lot more collaborative working and very, in a sense, agile decision-making as well. So it's been a journey of years. I talked about the culture of discipline, but he's very slowly built that incrementally in the organization through example and just sheer humility that's gotten people to get behind him. And that's why I find him, really inspiring. And yeah, so Satya Nadella. And then if I had to pick another one, Barack Obama, but I won't go there.
Yeah, we've had Barack Obama before, so I prefer to focus on the other. Not to wildly oversimplify it, but certainly in like popular media and film and TV, this idea that to turn around a failing business, what you've got to do is go in and be really hard-nosed and cut all the costs, halve everyone's wages, sack half the workforce, all this other kind of stuff. But I think this example is really powerful because in a lot of ways he's done the opposite. He's made it more about the collaboration, about leading with empathy and making people feel more valued, because if you make them feel more valued, ultimately their performance increases. There's loads of stats out there around happiness at work and job satisfaction and how that equates to better performance, even better financial performance of the whole business. And I think it's a really striking example of that in practice at a global scale.
Yeah, and that's the impressive bit I think you mentioned, is that they've done it at scale, because this is not like a startup, right? To change the culture of a company that big is no mean feat, and it's testimony to his determination, but also just his sheer ability to inspire with humility, right?
Absolutely. Well, I think we're almost out of time. So thank you, Justin, for being here today. I've really enjoyed this conversation. We've gone off on some amazingly interesting tangents. I'm sure the listeners are going to enjoy it as much as I have, if not more. So the last thing I'll ask you is if any of the listeners, and I'm sure loads of them will, are interested in learning more about what you do and maybe getting in touch with you, would you like to point them towards your website or social media profile or book, podcast, all of the above?
Yeah, sure. So I could point them to my website. Less interesting, what I would point them to actually is the strategy and AI newsletter that I write, New World Navigator. So in New World Navigator, I basically explore various themes related to the intersection of strategy and AI. Really some of my humble ramblings, as it were, but I try to explore like current themes, and to bring as much insight to people as possible. So, feel free to sign up and connect.
Lovely. And I'll pop a link for that in the episode description as well, so everyone can find it easily. And that's all we've got time for. Thank you again, Justin, so much. It's been great talking with you today.
Thank you so much, David. Super enjoyed the conversation and look forward to catching up again, or rather having the next podcast in 20 years where we can discuss AGI.
Yes, well, hopefully we'll speak again before that. But yeah,
exactly.
At the very least, 20 years from now. I'll see you then. Well, listeners, I hope you found this episode interesting. It was a really topical conversation as we're all continuously having to navigate this ever-changing landscape of technology and transformation and AI and all these other things. And while those things are happening, it's really crucial to stay informed and empowered. That constantly evolving world of technology can be scary, it can be daunting, and leadership in those times can be doubly difficult. But the AI can't do it for you. So visit www.leadernotaboss.com for an array of resources and insights that will equip you to lead with confidence and adapt to the future. Plus, don't miss the chance to schedule a complimentary discussion with me to discuss your specific leadership challenges and goals. A heartfelt thank you to our incredible guest today, Justin Tan, for sharing his expertise and insights. Justin, your contributions were immensely valuable today, and I really enjoyed it. And to our listeners, your support is what keeps us going. So thank you as well. Your reviews, your feedback are an inspiration, and they really do make me feel better about what we're doing here as well. So keep them coming. Thank you. Stay tuned for next week's episode, a theme that's come up today and on several occasions in past episodes, especially when we've talked about the pace of change and the impact that can have to tech leaders, is stress at work. So to tell us more about that, the science behind the brain, and some of the coping strategies for stress in the workplace, next week we will be joined by stress management expert Chris Wood. Managing stress and mental health is most definitely not something the AI can help us with, so it feels like another pretty good fit for our discussions this month. So mark your calendars. Join us again for next podcast Wednesday, and I can't wait to have you back for another insightful leadership conversation. Until then, stay safe, keep on keeping on, stay calm, all those other things, and most of all, be a leader, not a boss.